everybody, and welcome back to another video. And it's finally happening. I finally get to review Morning Star by Pierce Brown. I just want to start off and apologize to anybody who wanted a Golden Sun video because I never made one. I'll be honest, I never had much of an intention of reviewing it, and by the time I started giving some serious thought to it, Morning Star was like 2 weeks away, and I was just like, forget it. Just forget it. I'm never going to do it in time. I'm never going to be ready in time. Although I will say that I did try to film one, but within 25 minutes of me rambling at my camera, I'd only covered maybe the first 100 pages. This is why it's not always good to do freestyle book discussions. But enough of that. We're here to talk about the reasons why I drink. I mean, we're here to talk about Morning Star by Pierce Brown. Same difference, really. For those of you who don't know, this is the third and final book in Pierce Andromeda's absolutely fantastic trilogy. So if you have not read Red Rising and or Golden Sun, you need to pause, read them, have your mind blown and your heart shattered, and then skedaddle on back to this video. Until then, it was really nice knowing you because I'm about to let loose spoilers. Back in 2014, I did this massive review of Red Rising that was basically a 25-minute video of me telling everybody why they needed to read it. I'm pretty certain that is my second most viewed video on this channel, and as I said before, I never did a video for Golden Sun. I did, however, do a Goodreads review for it, where I basically called it the Empire Strikes Back of this trilogy, and that is probably the highest compliment I could pay it. What I mean by that compliment is that I think for most of us who love Star Wars, and if you don't, we might have some issues. The original trilogy stands as the best, and let's just not argue over that. And a lot of us will say that we much prefer Empire Strikes Back over the other two films in that trilogy. And here's the way I view The Empire Strikes Back. Of the three films in the original trilogy, it is by far the superior film. Absolutely top to bottom. However, it does kind of need Star Wars for you to be able to appreciate it. Because Empire took everything from Star Wars that we really liked and upped the ante on it. And made it even better, expanded your worldview, made the characters even more complex and dynamic than they were in the original, which is exactly what Golden Sun was doing with Red Rising. But here we are now, raging towards the end, towards the dying of the light as we close out the trilogy. Considering we all left off Golden Sun feeling a bit like Detective Mills at the end of 7, screaming, "What's in the fucking box?" By that point, we think we've been forged through, we have made it through our own institute, that we are now purely scarred and we are prepared. We were so not fucking prepared for this. I was not fucking prepared for this. I should have known that I sold my soul, my brain, and like all my emotions to Pierce Brown the moment I started reading Red Rising, but I did not come close to comprehending that until I was reading Morning Star. There are many things that Pierce Brown is incredible at as a storyteller. I mean, he is just a master of the craft of storytelling. Besides the fact that you have a fantastic story and a really interesting world and writing that is just straight up cinematic, it's the characters which are fantastic. And the fact that he's able to write these characters while harkening back to ones that we know before. In Red Rising, I loved the fact that my favorite character was basically walking literary irony, and that was Paxau Telemanis, whose name means peace. And he was this huge hulk of a young man, and you were just like, and your name is Peace. I love you. Like, I love you. Golden Sun, some of my favorite aspects with the characters was the way that Pierce Brown was playing with the characters of, say, Achilles and Hector. Achilles being the pretentious, fancy way of saying Achilles, which is the way that I learned how to say it, because I grew up in a family of people who love the classics and can recite bits of the Iliad in ancient Greek. It's fine. Achilles gets brought up so much in Golden Sun, and you can really see it, because the story of the Iliad is about one man and his rage, and another man and his pride, and so the playing with who's the Achilles, who's the Hector, that was so brilliantly done in Golden Sun. And also little bits of like Julius Caesar, because the ending is totally harkening back to an Ides of March, and I was just like, I appreciate this. I appreciate this so much. And that just continues on in Morning Star. Characters who you think you want to stab in the eye, you now will feel extreme pity for. Or if you're like me, you kind of always felt a little bit of pity for them and just kind of hoped maybe they'd see the light, and who knows. The two biggest ones, of course, being Cassius and Roke. Oh man, the journey with Cassius and Roke and Darrow has been a rough one, because by the end of Red Rising, you're pissed at Cassius. by the end of Golden Sun, you're pissed at Cassius and Roke. But as angry as I was with them, I could sort of understand where they were coming from. Especially Cassius, who's always sort of been this weird dark mirror image of Darrow. And if I didn't know that all these titles refer to Darrow, so the Red Rising, the Golden Sun, the Morning Star, you could easily assume that at least 2 of the 3 could apply to Cassius. In any other world, Cassius would be Darrow. He's a character who seems to really want honor, but honor doesn't exist in this world. And the tragedy of Cassius is that instead of having hope that the world could maybe be better, that somebody could make it better, basically what Darrow has and what Mustang also has, Cassius just sort of drowns. He drowns in the despair of the realization that he's living in a completely honorless world and becomes enslaved to it without realizing he's enslaved to it, which is all the more tragic. And then you have Roke, our poet. And I always have a soft spot for the poets. I can't help it. So the betrayal at the end of Golden Sun hit me particularly hard because I was like, why? Why you make my poet betray everybody? Why is he turning Judas? Even doing so much with the kissing on the cheek, and you asshole! Asshole being Roke, not so much Pierce Brown. Nobody writes action like Pierce Brown. I have yet to find an author who writes action the way that Pierce Brown does. I read one review that called it like really indulgent Michael Bay style, and I have to disagree because I find Michael Bay's action is just there for the sake of having action. It doesn't actually contribute to the plot, whereas Pierce Brown's action scenes all contribute to the plot. They're all for the sake of plot. It doesn't feel like action for the sake of action. And one of the best battle sequences comes when it is Darrow versus Roke out on the rim. And that entire sequence was genius. And the saddest part was that the moment Darrow stormed the bridge and he said that Roke just looked surprised, I knew exactly how that scene was gonna end, which made me so sad. I started crying before any of the emotional stuff actually started happening. What I thought was interesting was that it was called the Battle of Ilium. For those of you who don't know, Ilium is another name for Troy. So I was trying to make Trojan War parallels in my head, and this makes absolute sense because Darrow basically whips up his own Trojan horse, and it's awesome. And yet ultimately the scene ends with a nod to Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare, and Roke is our Brutus. He goes out in an almost identical fashion, and I was crying at my desk. So with Roke and Cassius kind of really no longer villains, they're antagonists for most of the book, but they're not really villains, we're left with the Jackal. The Jackal, who in my review of Red Rising, I said, boy, has some screws loose in his head, and that is the understatement of the century. Oh my god, I can't even. He is one of the few characters I could really just see as a villain and not just an antagonist. The scenes with the Jackal were very few and far between, but the ones that we did get I thought were really interesting. Especially the one between Darrow, Mustang, and the Jackal, where the Jackal was like talking to him on a video screen or like a hologram. Something, I think it was a hologram. And Darrow straight up says that he pities him. And the Jackal is so taken aback by this, because pity is something that the Golds really are not supposed to have. And while I'm not going to speak for what's going on inside the Jackal's head, I almost wonder if he wasn't offended by what Darrow was saying so much as he was just shocked. Because I could give a bet nobody has probably ever said something like that to him. And nobody has said it the way Darrow did. Darrow says it very honestly. He doesn't say it to mock the Jackal or to be nasty. He's just saying a fact. He's like, I pity you. And in a way, I do too. I pity the Jackal for what must have been an awful childhood. I mean, I can't imagine growing up as the son of Nero Augustus and living in the shadow of an older brother and basically knowing you are completely unwanted. I can't imagine that. But at the same time, I can't imagine being formed into the terrifying presence that the Jackal is. Because the Jackal is completely willing to commit genocide. Sort of just to say fuck you to everyone. He holds an entire planet or a moon hostage just to get what he wants. And he's so much worse than anything the Golds dream Darrow is. Because Darrow has a conscience and he has a moral compass, And the Jackal really doesn't. And that's why the Jackal I can look at and say, I think you are genuinely a villain. But there is that saying, villains are all the heroes in their own minds. So I have to wonder what the Jackal thinks of himself. Even with the amount of self-loathing, I think he clearly is going on in there. Like, there is an inferiority complex up the wazoo with that kid, and oh boy. I was very sad that Ragnar, aka PAX 2.0, ditched it. Why? Why, Pierce? Why? It was basically pointless death. Because that is a lesson you have to learn about death, is there is oftentimes such a pointlessness to it and a capriciousness to it. And I didn't like a reminder of that lesson. But I think we need to talk about Severo and Victra. I really do fucking love Victra. Because here's the thing. You have characters like Victra who are just badass motherfuckers, and I love it. She is fantastic. And here's the thing. As much as I love Mustang, I do. I think she's so great. Victra is my spirit animal, because I am not noble like Mustang. Mustang is noble. Like, let's just get that squared away. She's a noble character. Victra is just a vicious shit, and I identify with that, which, that's probably not a really good thing to say, but I really like Victra. I like her because as much as there is clearly an element of self-loathing, she's very honest about who she is. She doesn't try to pretend that she doesn't have basically vicious homicidal tendencies, and I kind of appreciate that. And as for her and Severo, bless. They are so perfect for each other. It makes me happy. I should have started shipping that a long time ago. I should have, because I never really shipped Severo and Quinn. Like, I knew that wasn't gonna work, you know? But Severo and Victra, why didn't I see that coming? Oh, it's so perfect. Severo has always been a fan favorite in this trilogy for good reason. When you have Darrow amongst the golds, he's kind of forced to speak in this very pretentious high lingo that they use, and nobody ever really says what they mean, except for Severo. As much as Severo is so much more than just comic relief, he functions that way in a beautiful way. Severo is one of the few who's willing to say exactly what he thinks, exactly how he wants to, and how he wants to tends to be incredibly crude. He's crude to the point of being beyond disgusting, but you love it because you're spending all this time with these gory damn golds talking and with their highbrow voices. This is my attempt at being Tim Gerard Reynolds, and that was a terrible attempt. Please don't judge me. And when you're surrounded by all that high lingo, getting someone like Severo, and then, we used to have Fitchner too, but the box. It's just a breath of fresh air, and I think that's why he's so popular with everybody. Besides the fact that we can't help but to love the vicious little shit. Okay. I'm usually pretty good at catching when authors are doing things. Especially with this trilogy, normally because there's so many pop culture references and things that are happening that I kind of start to pick up on them and figure them out, because I just happen to have watched way too much film and television and read far too many books for my time. But none of that prepared me for the shit that was happening in the last 100 pages. I can't even explain the last 100 pages of Morningstar, because by this point, I was X number of hours into the audiobook at work, sitting at my desk, and when they pulled their plan of shooting Severo point blank in the motherfucking chest, I lost my shit. I was crying through the whole 100 pages, whether it was out of complete shock, and then despair, and then shock again, and then joy, and then I didn't know why I was crying anymore, and then I just kept crying, and then the book was over, and I was just like, I don't understand what is happening right now. But I think the beauty of that whole segment with the plan, as I'm gonna label it, for the finale, is that everybody was in on it, and everybody fell back into their roles that we became comfortable with them being in. And this includes Cassius. I was almost disturbed with myself with how easy it was for me to give up hope on Cassius and to just go back to thinking he would be this horrible character, when he never really was. Yeah, he did things we don't like, and because we are in Darrow's perspective, and by virtue of that we're kind of rooting for Darrow, we therefore don't like Cassius, and also because we I like to think we are all good human beings and therefore realize that the rigid hierarchy of the world of Red Rising is inherently wrong, we're really kind of ready to just condemn and damn Cassius. And yet, from his perspective, he's the Darrow of his side. And if we were on the perspective of the Golds, if we were getting their perspectives the whole time, Darrow's a terrorist. I mean, there's no walking around it. He's a terrorist with a huge-ass body count. I mean, jeez. In Golden Sun alone, in like the opening, 50 pages, there are like over 800 people dead? Okay, to be fair, it was a space battle. It wasn't entirely Darrow's fault. People be dying around him. Now, this is not me condemning Darrow in any way. I love Darrow. I thought he was such a fantastic protagonist. I slipped into his perspective so easily in Red Rising, and I followed him throughout. And this is because he reminds me so much of Edmond Dantes. Although he has a lot less agency than Dantes did, especially in the first 2 books. Darrow really doesn't have that much agency in Red Rising and Golden Sun, to the point that Edmond Dantes did in The Count of Monte Cristo. Because Darrow, even when he is, picked up by the Sons of Ares, and then when he's also has a Nero Augustus as like his liege lord, I really don't know how best to describe that relationship. He's in his employ. There we go. He's in his employ. Even then, Darrow is bound by some sort of contract. He's still almost enslaved to someone. And I think it's really in Morningstar we get to see him breathe and break loose. He is answering to no one but himself, and also to all the people he said he's going to protect and whom he's going to lead to this new world when they win. And this is where Darrow really comes into his own. As much as he was being forged in Red Rising and honed in Golden Sun, he blossoms in Morningstar, and it is so fantastic to watch. I think it also helps that we get Mustang back, and I was really worried we weren't going to have Mustang back for a while, and she comes back far earlier than I thought she would, and it is glorious. Because Mustang and Darrow are such a fabulous combination, in the same way that Darrow and Severo are a fantastic combination. Because in a way, those 2 relationships accomplish a very similar goal in my head. What they accomplish is that they keep Darrow from becoming too vicious and too violent. Because Darrow is the type of person who can very easily give into his rage and slip into just bloody violence. To make the parallel again, he is Achilles, and the first word of the Iliad is manon. It's rage, and that's something which Darrow has in abundance, and for good reason due to his circumstance, given the first 2 books and even all the stuff that's happening in Morningstar. We understand his rage, and we understand why he can so easily slip into it. Unfortunately, when he does slip into a bloody rage, it never ends well for pretty much anybody involved. So with both Mustang and Severo, he has someone who can rein him back. Mustang straight up will tell him you're going too far, and she is noble enough that I think she becomes kind of the ideal that Darrow would like to strive towards a lot of the time. Severo is such a vicious little shit that Darrow looks at him and sort of realizes, if I'm agreeing 100% with this guy and I'm following his lead, I've gone too far. And if Darrow's thinking he's gone too far, then he's probably gone too far. So that's the beautiful thing about the relationships he has with Severo and Mustang in terms of what they accomplish in relation to Darrow's psyche. I threw my hands up in the air while listening to Darrow's revenge on the Jackal. It was so perfect. I could not have asked for anything better. And from then on, the book just kept going, and even as it was like you knew you were reaching the end, it was still so good. I didn't have any feeling that it was 1 page too many, because every page was important. And I felt that way about the entire trilogy. Every single page is important, and you need every single page of every book to really, for this story to succeed. I feel like I could go into a million details about everything that happens in this book, but I'm not going to, because I think the book speaks for itself. And oftentimes these characters have these fantastic moments of self-reflection where they do all the talking for me. So I don't know how much else I can talk about with this book other than that. The fact that we get this trilogy, a trilogy which really is about hope in the goodness of man, even at its, albeit fictional, darkest. I had not been so excited for a book the way I was for Morningstar since probably The Deathly Hallows in 2007. And I don't think I have been so happy and so sad that a story has finished since Deathly Hallows in 2007. I used to say that I had 2 series that forever changed me, really, and everything else just sort of jockeyed for places in the rest of the top 10. But there were always just 2 that were never moving. They were the top 2 series. And those were the Harry Potter series, obviously by J.K. Rowling, and the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman. And I'm really happy that I can say the Red Rising trilogy goes in there too. Not just because the characters are fantastic. Not just because the world is fantastic. Not just because it's storytelling at its finest. But because, like with those other 2 series, they were turning points in my life. It's before I read that series and after I read that series. Before Harry Potter, after Harry Potter. Before His Dark Materials, after His Dark Materials. Before the Red Rising trilogy and after the Red Rising trilogy. It was such a powerful message that didn't shy away from showing you the dangers of chasing after hope against the brutality of society. It didn't shy away from showing you man at both its best and its worst, and making you question everything, all your morals, wondering, well, if they're the good guys, why are they doing this? This doesn't seem necessarily good. Or if they were bad guys, well, wait, I kind of understand the bad guys, and maybe they're not so bad. Maybe it's just a matter of perspective. This is a trilogy that just makes you think all the time. And it doesn't do it by slamming a message into your head like a fucking Mack truck at 90 miles an hour. It's far more subtle. You just sort of find yourself thinking while you're reading it. I have one of those day-by-day calendars where you tear off a page, and I thought it was really appropriate that February 9th had a quote from my favorite Doctor in Doctor Who, because it's a Doctor Who calendar. The 10th Doctor, played by David Tennant, and the quote was, "This is magnificent." And I don't often say that because of me. This trilogy is magnificent. And I don't say that often. Because as much as I can really enjoy a lot of the books that I read, very few of them are like this one, are like Harry Potter and His Dark Materials. Very few of them I look at as turning points, as things that so intensely rocked my world, which this trilogy did. It is one of the few things I recommend to literally everyone I meet, and even when they say they don't like science fiction, I say it doesn't matter. It's not, don't think of it that way. So I can only think to close out this review the way I did close out my Goodreads review, which is to say thank you to Pierce Brown. Thank you for crafting this story. Thank you for writing it down and for sharing it with all of us. Because we live in a world that can often be very dark and terrifying and can knock us down and can just basically beat the shit out of us, Pierce Brown gave us a trilogy about a rising tide of sons and daughters who shone brighter than the morning star itself, that blazed with such glorious hope and ferocity that it sort of reinforced, at least to me, that feeling that ad astra per aspera, to the stars through effort. That when you want something and you chase it and you work for it and you realize that there's gonna be pain along the way and that every action has a consequence, you can rattle the stars. You can make a difference. You can do something pretty spectacular. And it's a bloody damn, gory damn, beautiful thing.